The wind pushed trash across the alley behind the grocery store. It was a cold Chicago night. The smell of wet cardboard and old food hung in the air. David Turner pulled his coat tighter and sat beside the dumpsters. The concrete beneath him felt like ice. A city bus growled past at the end of the block. He watched its lights disappear. For a moment, he imagined being on that bus. Warm, dry, going somewhere that felt like home. He was 48 years old. 2 years earlier, he owned a small brick house on the south side. He had a wife, he had a steady job, he had a garage full of tools and a little garden in the backyard. Now, everything he owned fit inside a worn backpack. Still, something inside him refused to quit. That stubborn piece of him was the only thing nobody had managed to take. A police siren echoed somewhere far away. David adjusted the blanket around his shoulders and reached into his backpack. He pulled out a small notebook. Every night he wrote in it, sometimes only one sentence, sometimes 10 pages. Tonight he wrote 4 words, still here, still trying. Then he closed the notebook. He had no idea how important those words would become. Snow started falling. Not hard, just enough to dust the tops of the dumpsters. David looked up at the dark sky. A year ago, snow made him angry. Now, it mostly made him tired. He stood and started walking toward the shelter. The streets were nearly empty. A few people hurried past without looking at him. Others looked away the second they noticed him. He understood. People saw the beard, the worn boots, the dirty backpack. They made decisions before he spoke a word. That used to hurt. Now it barely surprised him. The shelter sat inside an old building near a busy road. The smell hit him before he entered. Bleach, wet clothes, old coffee. Too many people sharing too little space. A volunteer nodded at him. "Evening, David." "Evening." She smiled. That mattered, more than she probably knew. Most people forgot homeless people had names. The volunteer never forgot. Inside, rows of cots filled the room. Men talked quietly. Some stared at phones. Some stared at nothing. David found his usual cot. He sat down. Across from him sat Marcus. Marcus had been a truck driver. Then diabetes cost him a foot. Then medical bills cost him everything else. Marcus lifted a hand. "You eat yet?" David nodded. "Gas station sandwich." Marcus laughed. "Living large. Best meal this week." "That's sad." "Very." They both laughed. Sometimes laughter was the cheapest medicine available. When the lights dimmed later, David lay awake. Sleep rarely came easy. Not because of noise, not because of the hard cot, because memories never stopped showing up. His mind drifted backward, back to when things still made sense, back to when he wore work boots instead of survival boots, back to when he was David, the maintenance supervisor, not David, the homeless guy. For 21 years, he worked at a manufacturing plant. He knew every machine, every pipe, every strange sound the building made. The younger workers came to him for help. The managers trusted him. The paycheck wasn't huge, but it paid the mortgage, it bought groceries, it kept the lights on. He wasn't rich, he wasn't trying to be. He just wanted stability. Then came that Tuesday. The Tuesday he still remembered better than birthdays. The Tuesday that broke everything. The plant manager called everyone into a meeting. Nobody expected good news. The room smelled like coffee and fear. David knew something was wrong immediately. The manager looked pale. His hand shook. A woman from corporate stood beside him. That was new. That was never good. The manager cleared his throat. Then he delivered the news. The company was moving operations elsewhere. Hundreds of jobs would disappear, including David's. The room went silent. Not shocked silence. The kind of silence that happens after a punch. Nobody knew what to say. David drove home afterward. The radio played. He never heard it. His wife, Karen, stood in the kitchen when he arrived. One look at his face told her everything. She sat down. "So it's true?" He nodded. Neither spoke for a while. The refrigerator hummed. A dog barked outside. Life kept moving. Their world did not. The first few months weren't terrible. David had savings. Not much, but enough. He updated his resume. He applied everywhere. Factories, warehouses, Maintenance departments, apartment complexes, schools, hospitals, anywhere. Weeks passed, then months. Interviews came, offers didn't. He started noticing younger candidates getting hired, cheaper candidates, candidates without gray hair. Nobody said it directly. They didn't need to. He could see it. Savings disappeared. Credit cards filled up. Arguments started. Small at first, then bigger. Karen worried constantly. David felt ashamed constantly. That combination rarely ends well. One night they argued over groceries. Groceries. Not affairs, not betrayal. Groceries. The kind of argument people have when stress has eaten everything else. Karen cried. David slammed a cabinet. Both regretted it immediately. Neither apologized. More fights followed, then more. The house felt different, like strangers had moved in. David kept applying, kept hoping, kept failing. A year later, he finally found work. Temporary work. Half his old pay. No benefits, no security. Still, he grabbed it. He worked hard, harder than ever. Then he injured his back lifting equipment. The doctor prescribed medication. At first it helped. Then it became something else. David never intended to depend on pills. Most people don't. He told himself he needed them for pain. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he needed them for fear. Sometimes for disappointment. Sometimes for both. Karen noticed. Arguments grew worse. Trust faded. The distance between them widened. Then came the divorce. Not explosive, not dramatic. Just sad. The kind of ending that happens slowly, paper by paper, silence by silence, until there was nothing left. Karen moved in with her sister. The house sold. Debts swallowed most of the money. David rented a small apartment. His daughter Emily stayed in contact. Thank God for that. She was 21, in community college, working evenings, trying to build a future. David loved her more than anything. Every Thursday he called, no matter what. That became his ritual, even when things got ugly, especially then. A few months after the divorce, the temporary job ended. Another layoff, another goodbye, another cardboard box. David felt something break inside him, not loudly, quietly, like a rope finally snapping after years of strain. He stopped believing good news existed. The apartment rent fell behind, then further behind. He received notices, then final notices, then the knock. The landlord wasn't cruel, just done waiting. David packed what he could, sold what he couldn't carry, stored a few things, lost many others. Then he stepped outside, homeless, just like that. No movie scene, no dramatic music, just a man standing on a sidewalk holding a backpack. Traffic moved around him. Nobody noticed his world ending. That first night was the hardest. He slept in his car, a 10-year-old sedan. The windows fogged, the cold crept in. Every sound woke him. A passing truck, a slammed door, a barking dog. Morning arrived slowly. David looked in the rearview mirror. He barely recognized himself. Things got worse. The car eventually died. Repair costs were impossible. The towing company took it away. He watched it disappear. That car had been his last shelter. He stood alone on the curb. His backpack felt heavier afterward. For months he drifted. Shelters, church programs, library computers, soup kitchens, temporary jobs. Nothing lasted. He learned survival skills. Which gas stations stayed open late, which public bathrooms were clean, which church handed out coffee on Mondays, which library outlets worked best. Knowledge became currency. One afternoon, he sat inside the public library. Warm air surrounded him. A librarian named Susan walked by. She knew him. Not well, but enough. "You looking for work again?" "Always." She nodded. Then she slipped him a flyer. Free job training, computer maintenance classes, community center nearby. David almost tossed it. He nearly convinced himself it was pointless. Almost. Instead, he folded it into his notebook. That decision would matter later. For now, life remained hard. Winter arrived. Real winter. Chicago winter. The kind that punches through jackets. The kind that freezes your hands before breakfast. One evening, David stood in line for soup. Snow swirled around the church entrance. People stamped their feet, trying to stay warm. A volunteer handed him a bowl. Steam rose into the cold air. The smell nearly made him emotional. Chicken noodle soup. Simple. Nothing special. Yet, it felt like a gift. An older woman sat beside him. She noticed his notebook. "You write?" "A little." "What do you write?" "Mostly reminders." She smiled. "Then remind yourself you're still here." David thought about that sentence for days. Because she was right. He was still here. Not thriving, not winning, but breathing. Sometimes that had to be enough. Christmas came. The shelter decorated a small tree. A crooked tree. An ugly tree. A beautiful tree. Several residents gathered around it. Someone played old holiday songs from a phone. Marcus handed David a cup of coffee. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." Neither mentioned how much they missed their families. Neither needed to. The silence carried it. Later that night, David called Emily. She answered immediately. "Dad?" Hearing her voice made his chest tighten. "Hey, kid. You okay?" "Yeah." She knew he was lying. Good daughters usually do. "I miss you." "I miss you too." "You coming by soon?" David stared at the shelter ceiling. "I'll try." She was quiet. Then she said something he never forgot. "I'm still proud of you." David nearly cried. Not because he felt proud. Because he didn't. Not at all. Yet she did. That mattered. More than she could understand. After the call ended, he sat alone for a long time. The shelter buzzed with noise. Conversations, coughing, televisions. But David barely heard any of it. He just replayed those words. "I'm still proud of you." Months passed. The seasons changed. His situation did not. The hardest part wasn't hunger. It wasn't cold. It wasn't even exhaustion. It was shame. Shame followed him everywhere. Into interviews, into shelters, into phone calls, into dreams. One morning, he applied for a maintenance position. The manager seemed interested. Things looked promising. Then she noticed the employment gap. Her smile changed. Not much, just enough. David recognized it instantly. He left knowing he wouldn't get the job. He didn't. The rejection email arrived 3 days later. He stared at it inside the library. For a moment, he wanted to quit trying. Just quit. No more resumes, no more hope, no more disappointment. He closed his eyes. The thought felt dangerous because it felt easy. Then his phone buzzed. Emily. Just a text. 3 words. "Love you, Dad." Nothing else. David laughed softly. Then he cried. Then he got back to work. Weeks later, he finally attended the free class from Susan's flyer. The community center looked worn. The classroom looked small. Only 7 people showed up. David almost left. Instead, he stayed. The instructor welcomed everyone. Computer maintenance basics. Simple stuff. Nothing flashy. Yet David found himself paying attention. Really paying attention. For the first time in years, something sparked inside him. Not confidence. Not yet. Interest. That was enough. He started attending regularly. Every lesson, every workshop, every free session. He borrowed books, watched tutorials, took notes. The notebook filled quickly. People noticed, including the instructor. One evening after class, the instructor stopped him. "You learn fast." David shrugged. "I've fixed things my whole life." The instructor smiled. Maybe that's still true. David walked back to the shelter afterward. The air felt different. The city lights looked different. Nothing had changed, yet something had. A tiny crack of light had appeared somewhere inside him. Still, he didn't trust it. Life had fooled him before. Hope could be expensive. The next Thursday, he called Emily. She sounded happy. Classes were going well. Work was going well. David listened more than he talked. Near the end, she asked a question. "What are you doing these days?" Normally, he avoided that topic. This time, he didn't. "I'm learning something new." "What?" "Computer repair." Emily laughed. "Look at you." "Don't get excited." "I'm excited anyway." David smiled. After the call ended, he looked down at his notebook, then at the flyer folded inside. The same flyer he almost threw away. A city bus rolled past. Its windows glowed against the evening darkness. For the first time in a long while, David didn't imagine escaping on that bus. He imagined arriving somewhere. And he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was getting closer. David couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. The shelter looked the same. The city looked the same. His life looked the same, yet something felt different. Not better, not yet, just different. Like standing outside before a storm. You couldn't see it, you could feel it. The next morning he woke before sunrise. That had become another habit. No alarm needed. Years of stress handled that. He folded his blanket, packed his backpack, then walked to a nearby diner. The owner let homeless people buy cheap coffee, as long as they behaved. David sat near the window. Steam rose from the cup. Outside, Chicago traffic slowly woke up. People rushed toward jobs, meetings, schools, appointments, places they belonged. David watched them, not with jealousy, not anymore, mostly with curiosity. He wondered what it felt like to have a normal Tuesday again. A waitress approached. "You writing?" She pointed at the notebook. "Trying to. What do you write about?" "Mostly things I don't want to forget." She nodded. "That's smart." Then she walked away. David looked down at the page. He wrote another sentence. "Learn something every day." Then he closed the notebook. The computer class continued. Week after week, David became the first student to arrive, the last student to leave. He asked questions constantly, sometimes too many. The instructor never seemed annoyed. His name was Mike, former military, former IT manager. Straightforward, patient. The kind of man who said exactly what he meant. One evening, Mike handed David an old laptop. The thing looked ancient. Several keys were missing. The battery barely worked. "Take it." David blinked. "What?" "Take it home." "I don't have a home." Mike looked embarrassed. Then David laughed. "It's okay." Mike laughed too. "You know what I mean." David nodded. "Why?" "Because you need practice." David stared at the laptop. Nobody had given him something useful in a long time, not out of pity, out of belief. That felt different. He carried it everywhere afterward. The shelter, the library, coffee shops, anywhere with an outlet. He repaired it, took it apart, put it back together, then repeated the process. Sometimes people watched, sometimes they asked questions. David liked helping, he always had. The feeling returned faster than expected. One afternoon, a young guy approached him at the library. The kid looked nervous, maybe 19, maybe 20. "My laptop won't start." David glanced up. The kid held a battered computer. "Mind looking at it?" David hesitated, then nodded. 20 minutes later, he found the problem, a loose connection. Simple. The screen lit up. The kid grinned. "No way." David smiled. "There you go." "How much?" David wasn't sure how to answer. The kid pulled out $20. David froze. He hadn't expected that. "That's okay. Take it." David looked at the money, then slowly accepted it. $20. Not much, yet it felt enormous, because somebody paid him for a skill again, not charity, not a handout, work, real work. The feeling stayed with him all night. Marcus noticed. "You look weird." David laughed. "Thanks." "No, good weird." David told him about the laptop. Marcus nodded slowly. Maybe that's something. Maybe. Neither knew how right that would become. Weeks later, another opportunity appeared. Then another. People started asking him for help. A cracked screen, a frozen computer, a slow laptop. Small problems, small payments, nothing life-changing. Still, money started appearing, little by little. David saved every dollar. He bought better clothes first, then better shoes, then a prepaid phone plan. Simple upgrades, huge victories. One afternoon, he called Emily. "Guess what?" "What?" "I made $80 this week." Silence. Then cheering, actual cheering. David laughed. "Calm down. No, it's only $80. It's your $80. That hit him hard, because she understood. Every dollar represented effort, belief, progress, something returning. After hanging up, David sat quietly for a while. The library buzzed around him. Keyboards clicked, printers hummed, pages turned. Life moved forward. And maybe he was finally moving with it. Then came disappointment. The first one. An electronics shop posted a job opening. David applied immediately. The interview went well, better than expected. The manager seemed impressed. David walked out hopeful. A week later, they hired somebody else. Someone younger, someone with recent experience. David stared at the email, his stomach sank. The old feeling returned. That familiar weight, that familiar voice. Why bother? The voice sounded convincing. It usually did. That night, he skipped dinner, skipped conversation, skipped everything. Marcus eventually sat beside him. "You okay?" No. Marcus nodded. You quitting? David looked at him. No. Good. Then Marcus stood and left. That was it. No speech, no lecture, just one question. You quitting? No. Good. Sometimes that's enough. David woke the next morning angry. Not defeated, angry. There was a difference. Anger gave him energy. Defeat took it away. He spent the day applying for more opportunities, then more, then more. By evening, he had submitted 17 applications. Nothing happened immediately. Of course it didn't. Life rarely worked that way. Another month passed. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. The city softened. Snow disappeared. Trees started waking up. People smiled more. David noticed everything. One afternoon, Mike pulled him aside after class. I've got something. David looked up. What? A friend owns a small repair shop. David felt his heartbeat increase. Mike continued. He needs part-time help. David stayed quiet. He didn't want to get excited. Not yet. Mike handed him a business card. Tell him I sent you. The card felt heavy in his hand. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, he walked 3 miles to the shop. He arrived 30 minutes early. The sign outside looked old. The windows looked older. Still, it was a business. A real business. Inside, electronics covered every surface. Computers. Phones, printers, tablets, wires everywhere. A man stood behind the counter. Gray hair, reading glasses, coffee cup. You David? Yes, sir. The man extended a hand. I'm Ron. They talked for nearly an hour. Skills, experience, life, everything. Ron asked difficult questions. David answered honestly, including the homelessness, including the gaps, including all of it. Ron listened quietly. Finally, he leaned back. You know your stuff. David nodded. A little. Ron smiled. No. Then he pointed at a laptop nearby. Fix that. David spent 40 minutes diagnosing the issue, then another 20 repairing it. Ron watched the entire time. When David finished, the laptop started perfectly. Ron nodded once. When can you start? David almost missed the question. What? When can you start? For a second, he couldn't speak. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. Ron pretended not to notice. David appreciated that. Tomorrow. Good. That was it. No dramatic music, no celebration. Just a job. Part-time. Modest pay. But real. Very real. David left the shop and walked 3 blocks before stopping. Then he sat on a bench. People passed around him. Cars moved through intersections. A train rattled overhead. Chicago carried on. David stared at the business card, then at the sky. Then he laughed, then he cried, both at once. A woman walking her dog looked concerned. David waved. I'm okay. For the first time in years, he actually meant it. The shelter celebrated that night. Not officially, just the residents. Marcus bought vending machine snacks. Someone found extra soda. The party cost maybe $12. It felt priceless. You got a job, David smiled. Part-time, Marcus pointed. Still counts. Everyone agreed. The next morning, David arrived early, again. Ron immediately put him to work. The pace was intense. Customers came nonstop. Problems piled up. Mistakes happened. David made several. One cost the shop money. He expected to be fired. Instead, Ron called him into the office. David prepared for bad news. Ron sat down. Learn from it. What? Learn from it. That's it? Ron looked confused. What else would happen? David didn't know how to answer, because lately every mistake felt fatal. Every setback felt permanent. Ron didn't see it that way. That realization changed something. Months passed. David improved. Customers requested him by name. His confidence slowly returned. Not all at once, piece by piece, the way it left, one piece at a time. Then another problem arrived. The shelter announced changes, funding issues, fewer beds available, more people needing help. David suddenly faced another housing crisis. The old fear returned immediately. He couldn't afford an apartment yet, not even close. The waiting list for assistance stretched forever. Every option looked impossible. Every solution seemed out of reach. One night he sat outside alone. The spring air felt cool. Cars passed nearby. His notebook rested in his hands. He flipped through old entries, page after page. Pain, fear, embarrassment, hope, tiny victories. Then he found the words written long ago. Still here, still trying. He stared at them. Those words had survived everything, just like he had. His phone buzzed, a text from Emily. "Dinner tomorrow? I'd love to see you." David smiled, then looked up at the city lights. Life was improving, that much was clear. But one huge question remained. Where would he go next? Because success finally seemed close enough to touch, and somehow that made losing it feel even scarier. David showed up 15 minutes early for dinner. Emily laughed the second she saw him. "You've always been early." "Not always, always." They hugged outside a small restaurant near her apartment. The smell of grilled burgers drifted through the evening air. Traffic rolled past. People laughed on nearby patios. For a moment, everything felt normal. Inside, they found a booth. Emily studied him carefully. "What?" She smiled. "You look different." David looked down. He wore clean clothes, new shoes, a button-up shirt from Goodwill. Nothing fancy. Still, he understood. He looked more like himself. "I feel different." "I can tell." They ordered food, talked about work, talked about classes, talked about everything except homelessness. Eventually, Emily reached across the table. "Dad, yeah, I'm really proud of you." There were those words again. The same words that carried him through dark nights. This time they felt different, more real, because maybe he was finally starting to believe them too. After dinner, they walked outside. The sun had almost disappeared. Orange light reflected from office windows downtown. Emily stopped near her car. "I've been saving something." David frowned. "What?" She handed him an envelope. He opened it. Inside was a small key. He stared at it, then at her. "What is this?" "My friend needed a roommate." David blinked. "What?" "There's a room available." He couldn't speak. Emily continued. "It's affordable." His eyes filled immediately. "Dad, you don't have to say yes." He looked away. The city blurred. People walked past. Nobody knew this moment was changing his life. Nobody knew how many nights led here. "Say something." David finally laughed through tears. "Yes." That was all he could manage. Just one word. "Yes." 3 weeks later, he moved in. The room was small, very small. A bed, a dresser, a window. That was it. David loved every inch of it. The first night, he closed the door behind him and froze. Silence. No shelter noise, no coughing, no televisions, no strangers. Just silence. He sat on the edge of the bed, then lay down, then stared at the ceiling. Hours passed. Not because he couldn't sleep, because he couldn't believe it. A room. A real room. His room. Eventually, sleep came. The best sleep he'd had in years. When he woke the next morning, sunlight poured through the window. For several seconds, he forgot where he was. Then he remembered and smiled. Work continued improving. Ron trusted him more each month. Customers trusted him too. One customer owned a small business. Another managed offices. Another worked for a nonprofit. People started talking. Word spread. David became known as the guy who fixed problems. Not just electronics, problems. That reputation mattered. One afternoon, Ron called him into the office. Again. David still hated those conversations. Old habits die hard. Ron sat behind the desk. "You busy?" "Usually." "Good." Ron slid paperwork across the desk. David looked confused. "What is this?" "A promotion." David stared. "What?" "You heard me." The raise wasn't huge. The title wasn't impressive. None of that mattered. It was proof. Proof that someone saw value in him. Proof that his life wasn't frozen in failure. Proof that moving forward was possible. David signed immediately. Then called Emily. She screamed loud enough to hurt his ear. He laughed the entire time. Months became a year, then another. Life continued building. Not perfectly, not magically, steadily. That's how real recovery works. One brick, then another, then another. David saved money, paid off old debts, fixed his credit. Slowly, painfully. Some weeks felt endless, but progress remained progress. The notebook continued filling. Every lesson, every mistake, every win. Everything went inside. One evening, he sat alone reading older entries. The earliest pages shocked him. The fear felt fresh. The hopelessness felt familiar. Yet the writer felt like a stranger. Not because David had become someone new, because he had become himself again. There was a difference. One cold December afternoon, nearly 3 years after sleeping beside those dumpsters, David received another surprise. Ron approached him carrying a folder. "Take a look." David opened it. Inside were business documents. "What am I looking at?" Ron smiled. "I'm retiring." David froze. The words hung in the air. "What?" "I'm retiring." The shop suddenly felt quieter. "What happens now?" Ron leaned back. "Depends." David felt nervous. "Depends on what?" "You." Several seconds passed. Then realization arrived. Slowly, then all at once. Ron wanted him to buy the business. David almost laughed. It sounded impossible. A homeless man buying a business? That sounded ridiculous. Then he remembered something important. He wasn't homeless anymore, and impossible had been wrong before. The next several months were terrifying. Loans, paperwork, meetings, lawyers, banks, stress, more stress, then even more. Several times David nearly backed out. Several times fear almost won. Emily wouldn't allow it. Neither would Ron. Neither would Mike. Neither would Marcus. Yes, Marcus. They still talked regularly. Marcus eventually found stable housing too. He never let David forget where he came from. Good friends do that. Finally, the deal closed. David owned the repair shop. The same repair shop that gave him a chance. The same repair shop where his comeback began. The first morning as owner, he unlocked the front door himself. The key felt heavy. He stepped inside. The familiar smell greeted him. Coffee, electronics, dust, possibility. He stood quietly, then got to work. Years passed. The shop grew. Not wildly, not dramatically, steadily, just like everything else. David hired carefully, especially people others overlooked. People with gaps on resumes, people rebuilding, people carrying scars. He recognized them immediately because he had carried the same ones. One day, a nervous man walked into the shop, mid-50s, worn clothes, embarrassed expression, looking for work. David recognized that look instantly. He saw himself, years earlier, standing on the opposite side of the counter. The man explained his situation: job loss, debt, housing problems, bad luck, bad choices, a little of everything. When he finished speaking, silence filled the room. David remembered another interview, another chance, another person who looked past the damage. Then David smiled. "When can you start?" The man's eyes widened, almost exactly like David's had years before. Some moments come full circle. This was one of them. Several months later, David stood in front of the mirror one morning. Nothing special about the day. No celebration, no award, no milestone. Just an ordinary morning. Sunlight entered through the bathroom window. David looked at his reflection. Gray hair, lines around his eyes, a few extra pounds. Still him. Yet something felt different. For the first time in years, he fully recognized the man staring back. Not the homeless man, not the broken man, not the ashamed man. Just David. The same person who survived everything. The same person who refused to quit. The same person who kept writing in a notebook when nobody cared. The same person who kept calling his daughter every Thursday. The same person who kept trying. He smiled, then headed to work. Years later, people often asked about success. They expected dramatic answers, big moments, secret formulas, life-changing discoveries. David usually disappointed them because success rarely felt dramatic. It felt quiet. It felt like sleeping without fear. It felt like opening your mailbox without panic. It felt like answering your phone without dread. It felt like paying for groceries without calculating every dollar. It felt like being able to help someone else. It felt like dignity, more than money, more than titles, more than anything else. One evening, he visited the old neighborhood where everything began. The dumpsters were still there. The alley looked smaller somehow. Or maybe David looked bigger. He stood quietly. Cars passed. Wind moved through the buildings. The city kept moving, just like it always had. David thought about that cold night, the notebook, the blanket, the fear. The shame, the hope, especially the hope. Because hope had never disappeared, it only got buried. He reached into his pocket. The notebook was newer now, the pages cleaner, the handwriting steadier. Still the same habit, still the same ritual. He opened it, then wrote one final sentence beneath all the others. Still here, still trying, still grateful. Then he closed it and walked away. The truth is that most people carry battles nobody else can see. Some battles happen in boardrooms, some happen in hospitals, some happen in shelters, some happen inside a person's own heart. The place doesn't matter as much as people think. What matters is refusing to believe your worst moment is your whole story. What matters is getting up one more time than you fall. What matters is remembering that dignity can disappear from sight without ever disappearing from the soul. Sometimes people need help. Sometimes they need a second chance. Sometimes they only need one person willing to believe they are still worth something. The strongest people are not the ones who never break. They are the ones who keep rebuilding after they do. David learned that confidence doesn't come from never failing. Confidence comes from surviving failure and discovering you're still standing. And maybe the greatest thing any person can do is keep moving forward when nobody is clapping, nobody is watching, and nobody knows how hard the journey really is. Because a life can change slowly enough that you barely notice it, until one day you look in the mirror and see yourself again. What part of your own life deserves one more chance today? Never mistake a difficult chapter for the final page of your story. The story is now complete.